This is Mariko Capital. I'm your host today, James Cox. We've got a very special guest on the line. It's Paul Buitink. Paul is an entrepreneur and Bitcoin investor. Paul, it's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure as well. Thank you so much for having me on.
Paul, you and we both met because we were interested in the gold industry. Could you just outline your original interest in the bullion industry? You worked for Gold Money, great company. How did you get started with that?
Yeah, so in 2007, when I saw things going wrong in the financial system with first Bear Stearns, and I was at some point I wanted to know better how the system worked, and I listened to Ron Paul. I started listening to other people like him. I started reading Mises and Rothbard, and I found out, okay, so the current system we have is not good, and we probably need something like gold as money. But I didn't like the concept of having to carry around coins and all of these things because of international and online commerce. So that to me didn't really make much sense. So I started thinking, like, how can we change the monetary system using gold without having to rely on coins and all of these things? So I thought, well, why don't we just put gold in a vault or in different vaults and then issue claims on that gold and use these claims to pay each other online? So I thought that's kind of a good idea. Maybe I should build a company around that. But of course, you first have to Google before you set up a company. So I found out there was actually a company doing that already, just that. And there was also something like eGold, but right then and there I saw Gold Money is basically the company that is trying to roll out a digital gold currency system. So I was directly fascinated by their idea and how they were executing it. So I contacted the company. It's a company founded by James Turk, someone you also know well. I got great respect for him. And at that point, I thought, like, let's just see if I can work with them. First, I had James Turk over for a conference in Holland that I was organizing, and so that was a good chance for me to get to know him better. And then eventually, I got offered a job there, and I started working there in 2010. And because of that, I was able to even learn more about the different money systems out there. So I really became more and more interested in kind of the perfect money and how we could change society in that sense. Ultimately, I became head of marketing there, but I quit last year, September, to focus more on cryptocurrencies. Because it was also at Gold Money where I started to learn more about cryptocurrencies at some point. And even at first, I wasn't really interested in it that much because I thought, well, it's not tangible, it's not intrinsic. Like most of the arguments that they use now, that a lot of people of gold bugs use to criticize cryptocurrencies, I was using those arguments too at some point. But later on, after reading more on it and understanding it better and reading Satoshi's white paper, I found out, like, maybe cryptocurrencies is better than or the way forward instead of precious metals. So I started working on that, and then I quit my job at Gold Money to focus fully on cryptocurrency, like money alternatives.
Okay, and could you try and outline as a monetary scientist, what is your interest in cryptographic currencies?
Well, I see myself more as a monetary activist.
Okay.
Even though I like to read up on monetary science, but I'm not that scientific in that sense. I'm more of a person that likes to build communities and help companies to build applications to further the great cause of cryptocurrencies. But what I like about cryptocurrencies is that you can create digital scarcity. So with the good thing about gold, of course, is that you can't print it, and of course it can be mined, but the money supply grows relatively steadily and without big fluctuations. And of course, with fiat currency, central bankers can just, together with the commercial banks, of course, because they create most of the money, they can just create money ad infinitum. And the good thing about gold was, of course, that you have an anchor. You can just, if you have a gold standard, then at least your money's growth will be relatively predictable and stable. And it was amazing, but just the same thing you can accomplish with cryptocurrencies, and that basically was also happening with Bitcoin. There's a fixed limit. Of course, they can change the limit, but that would require consensus of the network, which is almost impossible. So in a way, it's digital gold in that sense because it's scarce, and the same applies to other cryptocurrencies out there. So that element I liked. But the good thing is about cryptocurrency, something you don't have with gold, is that you can just use it over the internet. And of course, with gold money, you could. But with gold money, with digital gold, you have all the regulatory issues, and you have.
Let's move on. Paul, which industries do you think should be taking notice of blockchain technologies? Obviously, remittance, for example, seems like a fairly obvious example. But moving forwards into the years to come, what other areas do you think could take advantage of this technology?
Oh, that's a good thing about this technology. You can do so much with it, and I think in general, everything that can be decentralized will be decentralized as a law. So I would say everything that is related to crowdfunding, sharing, marketplaces like Open Bazaar or notaries, everything that where people exchange ownership or where people share capacity and want to have things timestamped, that can all be done on a blockchain basically. So I really hope to see a lot of industries being disrupted and decentralized because of the blockchain. And whether it will be the Bitcoin blockchain or side chains of Bitcoin, or it will be things like Ripple or Ethereum, we'll see. But I think a lot can be done on a blockchain. Also, things like Uber and Airbnb and Dropbox, already great inventions and great products for people, but they can even be made better if you decentralize them. So like things like MaidSafe are interesting too. A lot is possible.
Okay. And how would you recommend for people to better their lives or their businesses from blockchain technology? I mean, what's the best thing to do? Is it just go out and buy some Bitcoin or another altcoin, or try and incorporate it into their business or their life? How do people benefit from this?
I think it's important for people not to just buy stuff because they want to make a quick buck or something. I think you don't necessarily need to understand everything in detail. I mean, I'm not a technical expert either, but I do advise people to just start reading on Bitcoin and just try to get the basics, and then see why. Try to also come to conclusions yourself of why this indeed is a better technology than most of the things we have right now. And then you can read up on different altcoins and possibly things like Ripple, Ethereum, you name it. And then after you read up on some of these things, then you can decide for yourself whether you want to invest some of your money in it. I think it would be wise, especially considering the circumstances we're in. I don't think the crisis is over at all. I think things will only deteriorate. If you look at the debt levels of countries right now, it's much worse than a few years ago. So we basically swapped the whole debt at banks now to sovereigns, and there's no real outcome, I think, other than just printing money or defaulting on debt. So it will be quite messy, I think. So in that sense, I think it's wise for people not to have too much money in fiat and indeed consider these alternatives, but only after understanding it. And just don't buy because you want to be part of a big wave or something. I think it's important to understand what you buy.
Okay, all right, great. And Paul, lastly, how would people contact you or find out more about your work?
Best to just go to Twitter, and I'm there at Paul Buitink, and I regularly tweet in English. For Dutch listeners, they can go to my event website geldvoortetoekomst.nl or my Bitcoin blog at thebitcoin.org. But for international people, just follow me at Paul Buitink on Twitter. I'm sure you'll put a nice link in the description.
Don't worry, I will. Okay. Paul, it's been a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for asking me.